Well, welcome to Fox 23's FRIGID, where we take a deep dive with a keen eye into cold cases across the state of Oklahoma. Today, I'm joined by the Communications Director for the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, Roebuck, and Cold Case Task Force member Jeff Blair. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So this episode, we're discussing a nearly 30-year-old case out of Tulsa, Dena Dean. This is a case that many people recognize her name, and they know a lot about, or they think they know a lot about it. So Dena was 16 years old when she was killed in June of 1998 after leaving work one night. She was a Webster High School student, honor student, described by her mother as being a bright and caring girl who was close to her family. She was also a member of the school marching band and was about to enter her junior year of high school. Now, Casey, you've been pretty heavily involved in this case before, over the course of your career.
Correct.
Before as a journalist and now working with TCSO. So what about this case attracted you in both fields?
So I first got to know Dena's family when I became a reporter in Tulsa back in 2003, and I was instantly drawn to her parents. They were so kind. They were so heartbroken. And you get to, as a journalist, sometimes really bond with these families over the course of their journey. I probably covered their case until I went to work for the Sheriff's Office in 2016. And you become personally invested in it. Mm-hmm. You really want to bring attention to the case, and ultimately you hope that you can play at least a small part in making people care about it and drive it toward closure and ultimately an arrest. Of course, that hasn't happened yet, but I still very much care about the family, and I was excited to, when I worked for the Sheriff's Office, be able to drive media coverage for it in that role. So it was kind of a full circle moment to work with her parents as a reporter, and then as a public information officer for the Sheriff's Office.
Jeff, how long have you been on this case?
Been about 2 years. As soon as I joined the cold case squad, it was my first case. Of course, I had already raised up in the community. Everybody out there, like I told you, knew about this case. So anyway, I was assigned this case by Sergeant Huff and been working it ever since.
So the night of Dena's disappearance, she left her job and drove to the Town West Shopping Center that was nearby to meet up with a friend and give her a ride home. Do you have kind of a timeline for that night?
I do. Dena showed up about 9:40, I believe it was, and supposedly waiting to visit with somebody there. And a witness around 10 o'clock or so heard a commotion out in the parking lot at Marvin's grocery store. And so then they hear a red truck drive off, and approximately, I guess, the parents said at sometime after midnight, Dena hadn't come home. So the daddy drives to Marvin's parking lot, finds Dena's car there. The windows are down, and the billfold is in the front seat.
The last thing she said before she hung up, "I love you, Mom."
So they call Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, and being so close to the expressway, some of the first thoughts were maybe she's a trafficking person. She may have got kidnapped and trafficked. So then they start doing the investigation, and several days later they find her body off of South 49th West Avenue.
Right. So we know Dena was supposedly meeting up with a friend to give her a ride home that worked at the food store. Do we know if she was meeting anybody else that night?
I don't believe she was supposed to. Not that her parents were aware of or anybody else was aware of. They just thought they were meeting her friend who worked at the grocery store to give her a ride home. So if and when she encountered somebody else, no one else knew about it.
Right.
Correct. Her boyfriend worked at Marvin's, and we know that he checked out at 9:41, and we don't know if they got together. We don't know. We have been looking at all aspects of this ever since we've been assigned the case, and we have found a lot of information. But we're not positive on who she met up with. We don't know for sure.
When Dena never came home that night, like you said, her parents became concerned, and they eventually found Dena's car in the Town West parking lot, and Dena was nowhere to be found. Was Dena's car found the night of her disappearance? You said it was.
Yes, ma'am.
So they found it that night.
Mhm.
So how was the car left? Was there anything inside missing? Or?
Nothing was missing. It was just like she just abandoned the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
The window was rolled down, and her billfold was found in the front seat.
Mm.
I just hope these people will come forward, or if somebody knows their whereabouts, they will call them and tell them where they're at.
Now this is nearly a week after her disappearance. I think, was it 5 or 6 days?
6 days.
6 days. And her body was found near a pond or like a dumping site.
It was a pond on some private property. I would say less than 1.5 to 2 miles from the store, so not very far away.
That's correct, about 1.5 miles away.
And her body was pretty heavily decomposed at that point. So were there any items found near her body or with her?
Well, Tulsa County did the investigation, and they recovered items and evidence, and they turned it into the property room. So anyway, we're looking at all that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the good thing about now, since then, we didn't have the DNA available to us back then. Now we have our group. We've got a lot of really talented people in our group, and we have some people that specialize in the DNA with this new DNA. And we are pulling some of the items found at the scene, and we're hoping for good results from the DNA that we are going to be trying to find.
Mm-hmm. Were there any signs? Obviously, she was decomposed at that point, or she was beginning to. Were there any obvious signs of injury on her body?
Well, no, there wasn't that I'm aware of. The autopsy showed she had a broken jaw and other traumas, but that's it.
Because of the state of her body and had been out there for 6 days, the medical examiner didn't even make a total determination about the exact cause of death. So that's been another challenge that the cold case task force is trying to overcome.
It was ruled as a homicide, but obviously there was never a cause of death determined. So she was only missing for about 6 days. Is it normal for a body to decompose that quickly? Is that something, or was there anything you suspect was different in hers?
No, I'm not an expert on that, but she had been out there in the sun and the elements.
Summertime,
6 days, and she had she had been decomposed for a while.
The main question, obviously, for 30 years or nearly 30 years has been who killed Dena Dean, and obviously investigators like yourself have never stopped looking for the answer. Did you ever feel like you got close to that answer, and then it just kind of...
We've had a few false starts. I think that we have very solid persons of interest in this case, it's fair to say. And there were a lot of challenges that these guys have tried to overcome, lack of evidence in the very beginning. And I feel like we've had some hopeful moments where we sent stuff off for DNA testing, but it didn't meet the threshold it needed to file charges. It has pointed us in the right direction. We think we know who we're looking at. We don't know conclusively. But there's never been enough for the district attorney to file charges. And so that's why the work of the cold case task force is so incredibly invaluable. These volunteers don't get paid a dime for what they do. They come in here on their own time, use all of their various law enforcement skill sets to try and move these cases forward. And I can say since the cold case task force was established in 2016, we're a lot closer to the goalposts than we were in 2016. We're not there yet, but these guys are working tirelessly, and I'm hopeful that with their help and their expertise and their determination, it's going to get us closer to where we need to be. And ultimately, we would love to present a case to the district attorney where he feels comfortable filing on it. It's not a pipe dream. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
We're still sending things off for testing. These guys are still working on it every day. So I have hope, and I want the family to have hope.
So in 2002, that's when the task force was created, right?
2016.
2016. Okay. So was Dena's case in mind when you created that task force?
Absolutely. It was at the top of the sheriff's list when he hand-selected these incredible retirees to come and work on the case. Dena Dean was the first one we had in mind. Just because, the cases weren't as organized as they were coming into the sheriff's administration. He initially called Mike Huff, who thought it would be a short endeavor to come in and organize the cases and take a look at them, and then look what it's become now.
Yeah.
We have 19 cases that are actively being looked at, and thousands of hours of work has been put into it over the past 8 years since then.
There's hundreds and hundreds of years of talent. It's not just experience, it's talent. So we're bringing that to this.
So who was involved in like the original creation of the task force?
So the sheriff reached out to Mike Huff initially, and then Mike reached out to several of his law enforcement friends who had retired and had a little bit of time on their hands, and a desire to help. And Doc, who just passed away just a couple weeks ago, was one of the first ones.
He was.
Sam, do you recall who else?
Yeah, there was a couple of FBI agents.
Jim Norman,
Jim Norman,
who
was
worked
there.
on the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah, Lowell Sprague, an ATF agent. He interviewed Tim McVeigh. So we've got some very, very capable people.
Right.
And I was going to say that when this case come up, I wasn't on the case then. I wasn't part of it, but I have since found out quite a bit about what had taken place. Well, they went and talked to every possible witness and every possible suspect. They made a big plunge, lack of better words, and they come up with a lot of information on this. And we are, like she said, which she's exactly right, we have our theory and our feelings about what transpired. But we just don't have enough evidence at this time to file any charges. So we're still working on them. We're following leads all the time. Anytime something comes in, they call us, then me and my partners or other guys will go pursue it. And we'll listen to what they got to say, and then we'll follow it as far as we can take it until we can't take it any further. But we think we're pretty close.
Yeah. So you would say that's the most difficult part of this case, specifically, is just that lack of, I guess, DNA evidence?
In a lot of these cold cases, you kind of have a pretty good idea about who and what happened. The problem is you got to get to the finish line. You got to find enough evidence to take to the DA, and he says, absolutely, we'll file charges. Well, in this case, we're not quite there yet. But we're hopeful that with this new DNA technology that we'll get a little closer.
She deserves to have justice, and that's what I want.
Can I ask, in any case, not necessarily specifically this one, where do you start? Because, like you said, there's plenty of capable people on this team that have spent years in this department. So I'm just curious, obviously these are not cut and dry. They're not easy cases to solve, or they would have been wrapped up in the moment. So where do you even start?
Well, like I was talking to Mike, and he reminded me that these are 20-year-old cases that we have been assigned. A lot of the witnesses, a lot of the people they're not around anymore. They've got issues. So by the time we get the case, it's pretty difficult to go back through what somebody else is going through and get the results that we would hope for. So when do you start is a really good question. What we do when we get assigned these cases, we'll go back to the cases and we'll review everything. We'll make notes, we'll review everything, and then we'll start our own search from there.
Obviously, this case is still unsolved, despite how hard you and your whole team have tried to bring some comfort to Dena's family. I'm curious, how do you maintain hope with a case like this?
Well, another part of being a cold case squad person is you have to have a lot of patience. It's very, very important to all of us, for the family's sake, to be able to solve this. But you just have to methodically go through this case, follow all leads until you get to where you want to be.
And there are instances where sometimes it can work in your favor. People get divorced. People get out of prison and want to talk about their cellmates. So there are aspects to sometimes with time the fear of coming forward can subside, and there's a little bit of hope that maybe somebody wasn't comfortable talking in 1998, but they might be in 2025. So there are aspects where maybe that could, bring some tips forward when time
Very true.
passes.
Yeah.
Very true.
They need to have a conscience. They need to talk because it could be their child. It could be their grandchild. If you know something, you should talk.
Are there any current updates on Dena's case?
Nothing that I can talk about right now. Let me just say that.
But progress is being made. These guys are working their tails off. I would love to, at some point down the road, put a press conference together and tell you that we have, some good news to share. That's our ultimate hope. But in the meantime, the fact that we have these guys working on this case day in and day out, give me hope that we're going to get there at some point.
Right. Jeff, could you kind of talk me through a little bit of what your career was up until joining
Sure.
the task force?
You mean while I was on the Tulsa Police Department? Yeah, I joined in '74 and become a patrolman. Worked all the shifts, days, graveyard, evening shift. And when you're a rookie, that's all. You get Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. Anyway, then I went into canine. I was a canine officer. When we get an alarm and there's somebody in the building, they call me and my dog, and we go search them and we find them. And then I went to detective division and spent a little time, I think 7 years there. And then I worked fugitive warrants. Our job then was to, when they have the murder warrants, the robbery warrants, whatever, then my squad they would give us the warrants to go serve. So me and my team, we would go out and find them and serve the warrants on them and arrest them. Then I went back to patrol. My last few years of being with DPD, and spent my last 3 years in patrol on day shift, and then I wrapped my career up. And I'm kind of glad that Mike called me to get back into this. So anyway, that's kind of what I did.
Yeah. Like Casey said, you had some time on your hands.
Oh, I've got time on my hands. Yeah.
I think if you spend that long in a career like that, it's hard to ever leave it.
Oh, you never leave it.
Right.
You never leave it. There's, I know it sounds silly, but there are still times where I dream that I'm driving in a squad car again. And would I like to be in a squad car again? I sure would. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
That's why I retired when I did. But no, it never leaves you. Never.
And Casey, obviously you were a journalist before.
That's right.
And then you probably got so used to interviewing Tulsa County Sheriff's deputies in the department. What made you want to make that switch?
I had been covering the criminal justice system for 17 years prior to working at the sheriff's office. And I have loved telling stories, and I had loved advocating for victims and their families. But I had another child, and my intent was to just, stay home for a few years and raise kids. When a former homicide detective by the name of Vic Regalado decided to run for sheriff, and he's like, come do the media. And I thought about it for a little bit. I wasn't fully convinced. They were coming off of, a scandal, and there would be a lot of rebuilding in the public trust that would need to happen. But I knew that he was the right person for the job, and I knew that he would do a lot of good things once he was elected. So he convinced me, and it was a great shift. I was still working in the criminal justice system, still had my hand in the media, and it was actually a pretty smooth transition from one to the other. So I still even got to have my hands in Dena's case a little bit, and still have contact with their family and stay in touch with them. And even a couple of other cold case families that I had worked with through the years. So still advocating for them, just in a different way. And it's been a blessing, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, journalism, just like law enforcement, is another career that you never leave.
You never leave it.
You never leave it.
No, you can't get it out of your system.
Definitely not. You're always looking for that answer. And I think that's something that we have in common. So are there any other cases besides Dena's that you are looking into right now that you feel like you're probably close?
I've got 3 cases, and, maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic, but I feel pretty good that there's a good chance of solving a couple of those. I'm still working hard on them, and, chasing everything that I can, following all the leads and talking to a lot of people, and I feel pretty confident that I've got a good chance to solve a couple of those cases.
That's good. Well, anyone with information about Dena's case, please call the task force office at 918-596-5723. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.